thrilled today's guest, S.E. Cupp. I've been a fan for a long time. She's, of course, a big personality on CNN, a columnist. My favorite, where she appears, is the Daily News, an author, a make sense, which doesn't exist anymore. Somebody who makes sense, who's a Republican, and it's a dying breed. Well, actually, are you officially a Republican?
For all intents and purposes. I don't know what they would call me, but...
How's it going? Thanks for being here.
How's it going? What an interesting question. It's been a wild ride since 2015 as a movement conservative, someone concerned with conservative principles and underpinning philosophy, to see all of that completely abandoned. Not just by Trump, the figurehead, but by people like Mike Pence, right? Who were like sort of standard bearers who, know better. It's been wild. And to keep your center in this very disorienting political landscape and media landscape has been trying.
You wrote a column last week about Mitt Romney. I'm a big fan also. And will the party ever support a Mitt Romney-like character again? Are we here to stay with the base of the party being where it is? I keep saying losing is going to wake them up, but it doesn't seem to happen.
Well, first, I always like to say thanks for reading my writing and quoting my writing. It's not something that every interviewer does, and so I appreciate it. This is something that, I've been wrestling with, and I think a lot of other sort of movement conservatives have been wrestling with. What does it take to jostle the party back to its John McCain era, Mitt Romney era? Go back, Ronald Reagan, Barry Goldwater, when intellectual rigorism was important to the conservative movement.
Who would think we'd be longing for the days of Barry Goldwater? How about that one, huh?
Listen, who would have thought Democrats would be longing for the days of Mitt Romney? You and I were around for that coverage, at the same network. It was not kind. He was the devil incarnate. No. And that's
they were calling W a dictator and making fascist and Hitler references. Give me W. What a lovely, delightful, made a bad bet on Iraq. But other than that, you can't fault the guy. Saved millions of lives in Africa. This was a man of the people.
And similarly, I know a lot of conservatives that look back at Obama and say, God, he wasn't really that bad.
Yeah.
And we kind of gave him a bum deal because everyone next to Trump looks way, way worse. But there's sort of two schools of thought as to how the Republican Party breaks loose of this. One is that it will take a Mitt Romney moderate figure to say, guys, we need to come back to our middle ground, our roots, our conservatism, and we need to sound a lot more like the rest of the country. The other alternative is that it takes a far, far left progressive to get elected. That's not Joe Biden, someone more like AOC or Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders, to really break Republicans out of this MAGA trance and say, we're never going to win. And, the progressive left is so far from where the center is. We've got to really come back together as Republicans and remember who we are. I don't really know if either of those are possible in the near term. We'll have to see, but I think MAGA's around for a long time.
I agree with you. I think that's where it is. We're going to talk a lot of politics. I want to go back, talk a little bit about you and growing up. And I did not know you were a prima ballerina. Ballet was a big part of your life for a decade or so.
Yeah, a decade. And it was my whole life because this is so weird. But when I was 6 or 7, we were trying to find something for me to do after school, right? Because all my friends were busy. And we picked ballet because there was a ballet school in town where I grew up in Andover, Massachusetts. We didn't know anything about it. We just signed up. And it ended up being, we very quickly learned, this Russian Vaganova, super strict, no talking, no fun costumes. It wasn't the competitive where you compete with teams. It was very serious ballet, yelling in Russian and French. And so I never did the fun dancing. I was always in this very competitive environment with it. So I never enjoyed it. I kept doing it because I wanted to keep getting better and I wanted to keep getting praise from people who never gave it to you. And so I stuck with it of much longer than I think was good for me. But eventually, like in the nick of time, I got out when I did around 17 or 18.
And it brought some lovely side benefits, like I say this facetiously, tremendously, for you, like eating disorders and things like that, which is just, I mean, so many young women deal with that today. Talk to me about just if there's somebody, we don't have young, we don't have teenagers listening to this podcast for the most part, but if we have a parent listening to a podcast,
right,
give us some helpful advice there.
Oof. Well, on the one hand, you want to listen to your kids, but most of the time we hide that, and we hide it pretty well. And I said I was fine, and I said I felt fine. I had not just my eating disorder, my body issues, but I had depression, I had suicidal thoughts, I had all of that. So it's real important that you try to talk to your kids, but if you can't get it out of them, maybe a therapist can. And the best part about today, as opposed to when I was 14, 15, is it's easier to get mental health help. It's easier to ask for it. There's less of a stigma around it. We still have to fight that stigma all the time, but there's less of a barrier to getting it. And so I would encourage parents of any kids that you think might not be good, might be struggling, might be challenged, and might not want to be as open with you as you'd like them to be, just suggest, why don't we talk to someone? Why don't you talk to someone? I'll set it up. Because that can be a lifeline, and that can open doors that parents just can't always.
Yeah. You've been very brave talking about your fight with anxiety. You kind of hit a pinnacle about 3 years ago. You had what you called a meltdown or perfect storm. I've had some bouts with depression and anxiety. I've kind of fought it, and not everybody talks about it. And the more we talk about it, the better we're going to get, because it is the mental health issues in this country, and particularly with young people today, particularly since the advent of social media, is at such a DEFCON point. Talk to me about your battle.
Well, all the things you just said, social media and anxiety go hand in hand, and they are linked. There's tons of research on that, and it's especially affecting young people. But it's hard to talk about. I find it hard to talk about anxiety in ways that people understand, because if you don't have a disorder, an anxiety disorder like I have, you think, well, who isn't anxious? Who isn't worried?
Yeah. Anxiety and anxious, those are very different things.
Yeah, exactly right. I'm so glad you said that. And it's especially important for men of a generation to say that and to talk about it the way you are, because we need everyone to hear this. This is not reserved for young people, and it's not reserved for women. But yeah, it's hard to describe what an anxiety disorder is without someone wondering, well, you sound entitled, or maybe you just need a break, or you sound like you're whining, or toughen up. And man, I wish it were that easy, because I'm a pretty tough lady, and I've been doing this a long time. And if I could just toughen up and that would be it, believe me, I would do it. Yeah. But my anxiety is crippling and paralyzing, and it's a liar. My anxiety lies to me and tells me that a catastrophe is about to happen when I'm perfectly safe. And so learning how to live without anxiety has been the challenge of my life. And I'm in therapy, and I'm on medication. I'm writing a book about this. So I'm dealing with it. I'm in it. But I got really good at living with anxiety, and I got good at developing really unhealthy habits to live with anxiety. And I thought that was normal. And that's why I wish people talked about it more, because had I heard what my anxiety was 10 years earlier, I could have slowed some of these habits down, and I could have gotten help earlier, and it would have been much easier 10 years ago to unlearn some of this stuff than it is, 20 years in.
Don't you love when people say to you, well, Essie, I mean, you have you're on TV, you're a renowned journalist, you're married, you got a kid, what do you have to be anxious about?
Yeah.
What do you have to be depressed? Don't you love that one?
Yeah. Well, that's the fundamental misunderstanding of how anxiety disorders work. And mine functions in many ways, but I'll give you one example so that maybe listeners can get a better idea of what I'm talking about. The way my anxiety can work, like I said, is by lying to me. And so I'll be out and about in my town, an ambulance goes by, and in my mind, it is immediately going to my kid's school.
Yeah.
And within seconds, maybe 5 seconds, my mind goes to the worst possible scenario. And I do that all day. I'm working hard on not doing that. But that at the height of my anxiety, I did that 24/7, no matter what was happening. I would imagine the worst was going to happen. And in fact, I would bargain with my anxiety and say, okay, if I can imagine it and actually feel the worst thing happening, and so I feel it physically, I feel it emotionally, I experience it, maybe then it won't happen. And so that anxiety, the catastrophizing, I thought was keeping me safe. That was the thing, keeping me safe. And that's obviously irrational. That doesn't make sense. And I'm a rational person. So it kind of blows my mind today that I didn't realize I was doing this very irrational thing, but I do this irrational thing all the time. And so needing the anxiety and the anxiety rituals to keep you safe is a disorder. That's a disordered way of thinking and seeing the world. And it's debilitating. And eventually, I had a nervous breakdown, a complete break, because my mind and body could not keep doing this over and over and over again.
But out of the ashes, stronger, bigger, better, stronger than ever, right?
That's the goal. And I want to get healthier for me, right? Because I want to live a full life, and my anxiety takes me out of.
But it's more for your kid. But it's more for your kid.
But I have a kid, and you know this. You want to be the best parent. You want to model good behavior. You also, worrying about my kid is paralyzing, and it's not good for him. He doesn't deserve to feel that.
What is he, about 8 years old?
Yeah, he's 8 turning 9.
Okay.
So you want to come out of it stronger, and you want to get to know yourself better. And that's hard to do. That can be painful to look back at why you're like this. Well, how did I get like this? Why do I do this?
Yeah.
And that means in my case, and I think in probably everyone's case, looking back at some things that happened maybe when you were a kid, and they don't have to be huge traumas to have an impact on your future life.
Well, it's also, there's just chemical things. I mean, your genetics,
Absolutely.
we're born with stuff. I mean, it's a combination of both, obviously.
And it's important to find out what's happening. What of those things is really behind all of this? And it could be a combination, and getting help, talking to someone, getting on medication if you need it, finding the things that work for you. It's so important. It's really hard to do. But I'm writing this book not so people can really learn more about me, but so that a parent or a teenager reading this can say, oh, I do that. And that's not normal. And I don't have to live like this. I can get help for this. I want someone to learn that way earlier than I did.
All right. Thanks for going there. And I know it's emotional for you. When's the book coming out?
As soon as I finish it, Donny. And that's the hard thing is, like, when I'm feeling great, the last thing I want to do is think about my mental health and write about it. So carving out the time to write this is challenging, but I will get there. And right. this will get done.
Well, good. Thanks for going. Let's shift gears a little bit. CNN. Let's talk a little bit about just state of the world of CNN. I'm good friends with Jeff Zucker. I'm good friends with Chris Licht. So we're not going to get into any of the silliness, but how's things going there now these days?
Well, I've been at CNN for 10 years.
Okay.
So
you've seen the iteration. So you would, Zucker showed up there was about 10 years ago, was it?
I came with him. Basically, he went to CNN and then he kind of poached me from MS, and I went a couple months later. I've been there a while, and I've seen changes, ridden the waves. And this is a tough time. Look, it's tough for everyone in cable news because we're all kind of figuring out the future and what's next for cable news.
As our audience dies, right.
Then there's the demographic issues with cable news, the cord cutting issues with cable news. and the technological changes around that, the way people are viewing the news and consuming news, we're all dealing with that. And then additionally, CNN is dealing with all of these leadership changes, brand changes. I would love to hear your take on what our brand is now, because I think that's been the most disorienting part. Our brand is shifted, and I don't know what it is really.
Here's the problem / opportunity / problem with your brand. I call it the Burger King problem. Burger King has been known for burgers. That's who we are, right? And we're going to stay true to our core competency. And every time they do that, they go, but wait a second, it's not a big enough business. We got to do salads. We got to do tacos,
chicken.
So CNN's core competency, we give you the news straight. We give you, we're the most trusted world leader. We're the guys that when the shit's hitting the fan, you're really going to come to. But the problem is there a business in that anymore?
Right.
Is there a business? Is what Chris came on for, and what the raison d'etre is? We're not gonna be opinionated. We're gonna give it to you straight. But because of the world we live in, and because of this thing, we all want our bespoke news, and we want it that way. So you start to drift from that brand and start to do opinion. Well, that's not who we are. We don't want to be there anymore. Then you go back to that, and there's not a big enough business there. It's a real fucked up situation. Yeah. You guys have. If I was in charge of CNN today, I would probably. I don't know what I would do. Because I don't think there's but you could say, look, we're going to be who we're going to be, but there's not a big enough audience for that anymore. People want it a certain way. But then you go, okay, if we do opinion, we're not true to our brand. Yeah. And also, are we just a different version of
Yeah.
Is there enough place to slice? Well, we'll just go just right of center or just left of center. Is that enough of a slice? It's a conundrum. It's a real marketing Rubik's Cube. I have to, as a guy who thinks he knows everything and always has the answer, yeah. I don't have the answer for this one.
I mean, in a way that's encouraging, right? That even, one of the smartest branding marketing minds agrees that this is a puzzle. And, I don't know what our future is. I know we're important, and I think that we're a valuable product, and we do a valuable service. And I hope we figure it out, because I love it. I love CNN, but our future's real uncertain.
Here's the conundrum. Cable news success is about big personalities, and big personalities have opinions.
Yeah.
So it's tough to just go, okay, we're gonna go to the middle of the road. But you want big names, and you want not forget big names, people who really are emotional, people like yourself, people who can't help their insides come out. Yeah. And that's what people relate to at home, when it's authentic and when it's real. But then if you're doing straight news, that's counterintuitive to that. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the when is the Gayle King Charles Barkley thing, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, because that's a big swing. It's a bit, what's interesting about Barkley is that he's a guy, he's an example of, I don't want to call it being in the middle, being in the inflammatory middle, where he will just tell it like it is, yeah. But from both sides. And there are very few people like that and have kind of occupied that space and can get away in that space.
Yeah. Well, I think, first of all, I think Gayle is an unrivaled talent. I think
she's amazing.
Everyone would be lucky to get Gayle, and so I feel lucky to get Gayle once a week, and for as long as we'll have her. I don't know how long that'll be. I think that's great for us. I don't know what that dynamic is going to be like. Whether they have chemistry. Like at the end of the day, you and I have done TV a long time. You need chemistry. There are things that are important in television, right. And someone who's great at sports, I don't know, will be great in.
Well, that's the problem. You go back to this branding problem.
Right.
The very thing we're going to try and do is go out of the box, but then you're leaving your box. Yeah. And then Charles Barkley, CNN, I mean,
could be magic, right?
But yes, I mean, I think it's going to be interesting as work. But then you become the challenge that basically cable, as we know, is a repetition business, and it doesn't once a week is not the formula. Yeah. That works for a cable audience. So there's a lot of moving pieces there.
But maybe if it does well, you can replicate it in different ways with other big personalities on other nights. Yeah. And, that becomes the play. I mean, I'm game for disruption in this industry. And my lament has been that, when I was coming up in cable news, both as a viewer and then on it, we had all different kinds of debate and panel shows, right? We had the original Crossfire, Hannity and Combs when Alan was still alive. We had McLaughlin Group and so many. I had
the cycle.
I had one at MSNBC cycle, and then I came to CNN for a Crossfire reboot. There is not a single debate show in prime time on any cable news network, which blows my mind, because I think if done well, that could be a huge.
That's where I would go. If you ask me where I would go, is like, okay, we need fire.
Yeah.
We don't want to just be, but let's get fire from both sides, and let's see if we could do that. That's the place, the only space that's kind of left,
You want their dynamism.
I'm glad you brought that up.
And the thing with today's political landscape is, I could tell you I'm a Republican, right? You have no idea what that means. You would not know that I'm anti-Trump, conservative,
I'm a Democrat. I am so conservative on so many issues. Right. I mean, I'm a hawk. I could give arguments for the death penalty. I mean, a lot of things that would not come with being a Democrat.
Right. So you can't just do a left-right today. That's insufficient.
Yeah.
You need 4, 5 different kinds of positions represented and viewpoints represented. So you're getting the whole picture of the nuanced arguments on any given issue at any given time. Mm-hmm. I would watch that. I would watch the shit out of that. And I think a lot of people would too. They want to see those conversations, thoughtful conversations, modeled back.
We did it for a few nights, a pilot on CNN with Jeff called The Point, where it was 5 of us and different people in there. And Steph Rula was on one day, and a real eclectic group of people. And he was going to go with it, and he just kind of got cool. It did really well the first 2 nights. The third night it didn't do as well, and it was like it could have gone either way.
Yeah.
But that would have been the foundation of something like that.
That was exactly the kind of model I'm talking about. And we needed it back then. We need it now, I think, more than ever.
Yeah. Let's talk a little politics. As we're speaking, I think Trump is making his way downtown, or is already down there. Yep. We're sitting here as the president is in his civil trial. I'm sure he's going to take the 5th. Here's my question always about the country, because we could make Trump the problem, but my problem is that 40% of the people have seen what he's done and went, thumbs up.
More.
Yes.
More.
Give me one. Like the first time around, I get it. Hillary was a terrible candidate. Maybe he's just saying some of these things to get elected, and let's try something out of the box. It's the repeat buyers that just I shake my head and go, what? Trump's not even the issue. It's that's the issue, that almost half of our country is there.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And this point doesn't get noticed enough, that you could get rid of Trump, right? I mean, that's one thing. You can't get rid of his voters as easily. And what do you do? What do we do with that? The folks that want more of that, whether it's more Trump or generally more disruption, more sort of anarchy, more conspiracy theories. What do they want more of? And what do you do with that? And it's why I said back in 2020, look, even if Joe Biden gets elected, the world doesn't magically become an easier, less divisive place. Because those people still exist and they still want more of the thing that, drew them in the first place. And so for a Republican Party to say, well, we're over Trump, you have to be over his voters too. And you have to be able to say to his voters, we don't want you conspiracy theorists and QAnon and Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. I know Trump let you all come in. We aren't your party anymore. You will not find comfort and refuge in the Republican Party. They can't say that because they'll lose, right? And no one is willing to lose. But that's what you'd need to do. You'd need to turn away the voter bloc that is so entrenched and so toxic and corrosive in order to sort of remake the Republican Party into anything resembling sanity.
I think such a huge core of it is race. And when I say race, I mean not necessarily that, well, it is racism, that as this country, and I think 2040, the whites going to be a minority in this country. And all that means, and ever that means in terms of jobs and things like that. And I think the scariest thing for the Democrats right now is the migrant problem, because I think that really hits a nerve. Yeah. And I think that could Trump can win. Trump can absolutely win. And I think that's the kind of, I think the Republicans are going to run a campaign scaring the fuck out of people because it's got, the problem is very different now than it was because now it's in the cities.
Yeah.
And now it's not at the border.
Right.
And now it's brought, and it's this coming to the suburbs. And that's, if you look at where authoritarianism has risen all over the world, it's always as a result of a problem like this.
You're right. And unlike some other boogeymen that Republicans have seized on in the past, this is real. This problem's real.
This is real. Yes.
It's not made up.
You're not creating a caravan. It's not a mythical caravan.
And Republicans will overplay, but it's real. It's a real problem. And if Democrats are going to play this isn't a real problem game, then they're toast because it's real and you can't tell people don't trust your lying eyes. But the changing of the demographics of the country from race and ethnicity and age, I think is a problem for a lot of older people. Yeah. And I get their fears and their anxieties and their grievances. However, a leader would find a way to put those in a productive place, to calm people, to reassure people, to walk with people through these big changes. And what Trump did is light a fire, light a match and throw gasoline onto these fears, make them so much worse, turn neighbor against neighbor and say, the reason you're upset is because of, your neighbor next door or the migrant down the street or the woman this or the minority that. They are the problem and they are your enemy. They are why you are so aggrieved. That's not what leaders do. Leaders would try to calm this tension, and he's made it so much worse intentionally because it benefits him.
Let's go to the other side of the aisle. Biden, his numbers are just abysmal. And he's done a good job in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're scoring at home, if you look at his kind of legislative victories, if you look at the way he's handled NATO, is it just that he's too fucking old? Is that what it just doesn't translate? He gets up there and he's really looking old. I mean, he is, no matter how you slice it. And it's not because he's his age. It's because you could find people that age who are more, he's just looking old. Is that it? Or explain it to me.
I think that's a lot of it. And it's real. I mean, when his spokespeople or surrogates get up and like, oh, he's in perfect shape. We can see that he's struggling, and that's okay. But I think the other part of it is something Democrats used to acknowledge, which is that he was meant to be a transitional president and not a transformational one. Yes. Okay, great. He transitioned. We've left Trump. We have transitioned out of Trump. He's done his job. He's done it better than expected, in fact.
Yes, very much so.
Right. But he is now meant to suddenly be a transformational president, someone who's going to take us into yet another term as the country is wanting to move on.
To that point, are you surprised the Democrat, watching Gavin Newsom with Hannity, you kind of went, hey, we could use a little of that. Are you more surprised that there's not more of it, whether it's Gavin or somebody else, a little bit more of a groundswell? I mean, it's like verboten to even discuss it.
Yes.
If you're on MSNBC to say maybe, and our vice president's not the answer, but maybe there's somebody on the bench that we should take a swing with. It just doesn't come up for discussion.
No, and there isn't a bench. I mean, listen, there's a lot of stars in the Democratic Party, and there's a lot you could identify in the far left. I tend to think that the folks sort of in the middle, like Tim Ryan,
absolutely,
those are, I think,
I love Tim Ryan.
Oh, he's
I think
so
Wes Moore.
talented.
Let's watch Wes Moore also. I think that's a real
exactly
right.
And I think
right.
Tim Ryan was trying to get more leadership roles for a long time, and Nancy Pelosi was like, no, it's not your turn. Just no, go away.
Right.
Listen, when you don't create a bench, and you don't really empower people like Tim Ryan to condition Democrats for the possibility that these other old guys might have to hang it up at some point, then don't be surprised when there is this lack of imagination about who could be next. And when you can't really say it because you don't have the person, you don't have the 3 people, the 5 people that you could say, well, any one of these people could do this job. If you're not even allowed to talk about it, then no one's used to that idea. They can't get used to the idea. And it feels, like you said, it feels forbidden to even think about it.
Going to ask you a tough question, just going back. What's your feelings on the Trump appearance on CNN? Give me your thoughts. Just, I'm going to leave it very, very open because there was that was a fire. I have my thoughts on it. I know it's your network, so you have to be careful with it. But just right now, okay, what's your thoughts on that?
I did not like that decision. Once it was made, I think, we did.
Why didn't you like the decision?
Because you can't split the baby. And what was trying to happen with that decision was we were trying to get the eyeballs off of Trump.
Sure.
But we also
make a statement. We're both sides. We're going to hear it all. And
you can't, that doesn't work though with him. And so no. I think we only got the bad and none of the upshot really of doing that. And, elevating him like that, putting him in a room of friendly supporters.
Well, to me, that was the hugest mistake.
That's
to put a soundtrack on.
Then it's theater.
Like that. Then you take it. I could say this. You can't. I think there shouldn't have been an audience. I mean, it should have been it's certainly not a friendly audience. Yeah. And you needed, I think, an anchor with more gravitas doing it. And I think that was the other problem. He was able to run over Caitlyn. And you don't need to respond to that. I think that was the problem. I think that I could say, let's get him on. It's a big statement, but let's put a neutral backdrop and everything that means. And let's put Jake or somebody on there who can.
Well,
who
but
really
he wouldn't have agreed. He wants the friendly audience. That's absolutely. One of his conditions for all of most of his appearances, because it's theater for him. He wants to produce it, and having the applause behind the awful things he says makes you at home question, well, why do I think it's awful? They all love it. That's what he wants. He won. He won at that, and we didn't have to cede that. I don't think.
Okay, so I want you to handicap. Well, first, a few more things to talk about. You did a column a couple of months ago that the cage match, but the possible cage match between Zuckerberg and Musk is a metaphor for our times. By the way, I would love. I can't stand either one of those guys, but I would love Zuckerberg to just smash him in the face. Elon Musk, he's a Bond villain. Yeah, I mean, I find him so dangerous and so frightening. I'm glad you wrote that column.
Thanks. I mean, it's wild. I can't believe those words came out of your mouth. And I can't believe I wrote about that because it's real. These two people have threatened to hold a cage match. They've even talked about locations. It's crazy. These are supposed to be like the thought leaders, right? For a generation. But I don't know if I have the stomach to see any of that. I understand where you're coming at with it. Elon is, I think, a very dangerous person. But I don't know that I have the stomach for that kind of theater. I don't know.
But talk to the audience of why it was kind of a metaphor for our times.
Well, because the problem solvers in any society, right? Maybe they're your scientists, your inventors, your technocrats, your solutionists. These are supposed to be people who you trust and admire, who are leading a society to progress. And instead, two of our biggest thought leaders, at least in the tech world, want to fight each other because of personal grievances, literally fight each other because of personal grievances. How can we demand better of our politics if our thought leaders are devolving into child, playground antics to quote unquote solve problems? And meanwhile, solving no problems. I think it's just really disheartening, but almost like the Mike Judge Idiocracy movie, which now feels like a documentary, that we truly live in the stupidest of times. If this is what our smartest people are doing, we live in the stupidest of times.
Speaking of which, you wrote a column also about DeSantis, the Manchurian candidate. Have you ever seen a less appealing candidate in every sense of the word? And this guy was starting on up there on the top of the mountain. He was, I mean, he was packaged. He was ready to go, and you unwrapped it, and you went, yuck.
Yeah, I think you're like, he was packaged. And I have long thought of him as like a donor class invention, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I think donors said, we need Trump, but smarter. We'll pick this very popular governor who seems to be kind of willing to say anything and go anywhere that we tell him to. And, you know, I don't think he's a very convicted person. I think he is packaged. And in that way,
Sure.
kind of a Manchurian candidate where you tell him to go after the culture wars, he'll kind of ham-fistedly go after the culture wars. And,
Sure.
you know,
Yeah.
he'll do it. He might not do it well, but he'll do it. And yeah, when you got to like, who is Ron DeSantis and what is the there? There's not much. And of particular interest to me, there's not much conservatism. And I think in that column, I went through all the reasons why he wasn't.
People don't, I guarantee if you did a poll and it said, what are the basic tenets of conservatism? I don't think people even understand what that is anymore in terms of less government, in terms of rugged individualism, and you know, in terms of law and order. I mean, the Republican Party has no tenets of republicanism.
It doesn't matter because it didn't matter to
conservatism.
Trump. So lowering the debt and the deficit, Trump didn't care. It exploded. Even with Mike Pence, the deficit hawk right there, it exploded. He didn't care. Limited government, Trump wants a police state. You know, Trump wants to grow the size of government to protect him. Law and order. Well, it only matters until the cops are the ones coming after MAGA Republicans. Then we don't care about them so much. The intelligence community, the military. Well, they're great until Trump says they're not, and now we hate them too. Family values. I could go protectionism. Tariffs. I could go down the list of reasons I became a Republican. By the way, having nothing to do with abortion or social issues. And
you're pro-life.
You wouldn't find, well, I am pro-life, but that's not why I became a Republican. And I'm an atheist, so I'm not with a religious faction either. None of that stuff is in evidence now by the Republican Party. Certainly not by folks like Ron DeSantis, who seem to want to make the culture wars like his entire personality.
Hey, before I let you go, the one question I ask everybody, the premise of this podcast is kind of everything is a brand today. Everybody's a brand, everything. What's the SE Cupp brand?
I think I think before Trump it was, you know, probably a classic conservatism. But I think since it's more of like I'm balls and strikes. I will obviously call out the Republican Party, and when I call out Democrats, it's not because I hate them. I don't. It's because I think they're messing up. And I truly believe it. And so my brand has become intellectual consistency and intellectual honesty. And I have no room for hypocrisy in this landscape. I have no room for whataboutism and, well, if your guy does it, it's bad. If my guy does it, it's fine. I have no appetite for that. I'm exhausted by it. And so I think if that's where you want to go to someone who will tell it like it is, while also telling you where my biases. I think that's where I'm existing today.
I love the balls and strikes metaphor. SC, thanks for getting personal and going there today, and keep up the good work, my friend. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, Donny. You know I'm a big fan. I love you, and I love what you do. So thanks for having me.
Right back at you. All right, you stay healthy, okay?
Thanks.
Everybody, thanks for watching. If you like it, hit that subscribe button. And we love having you here watching On Brand, and just don't miss any future episodes. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.